Read from Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman, her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD, with Len Johnson and Bruce Rawles.
Thank
I
you.
think we're about into our, almost in our second year, if not into it. Pretty
I
close
believe
anyway.
so.
I think it was July 2 years ago that we started reading this. So we've done pretty good. We're on page 439 out of let's see, 511, I think is what mine goes to. So we're closing in on the end of this wonderful biography, which is
85% according to my Kindle.
yep, yep.
So, but it's so funny, isn't it, Bruce? Because we've read several books together
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
before this,
Yep.
and geez, we've been teaching together for many years, and
Probably a decade at least, if not
yeah,
more.
probably at least a decade,
Yeah, yeah.
and gone through the questions and answers on the foundation
Uh-huh.
website, and I mean all kinds of things, books, Gary Renard,
Mm-hmm.
and when we
Richard
got to
Young.
this book, we said, "Oh well, this will be really probably just a quick read because we know the story, and we're
Well,
just
I
kind
think
of
what we both remembered, well, I'll speak for myself, but I think
yeah,
it seemed like you had the similar experiences. Like the first reading, it's like, wow, what a great biography about Helen Schuckman. And then the second was like, oh my gosh, what a great
yeah,
story of everyone's resistance and investment in ego and working through that, what for most of us is a tedious, laborious process of realizing that the insanity of a dualistic thought system has not made us happy. Helen was just a stellar example of how brilliant our minds are, not in terms of cleverness, but just in terms of reflecting the light of truth when we get the ego out of the way. And conversely, when we're digging in our heels and resisting the truth, how absurdly um, fearful, insecure, lonely, and intolerant we can be. When we're fighting it, when we're resisting
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, and how silly it is
Oh
when you
yeah,
look back
exactly.
at it.
Exactly.
Yeah, how silly it
Yeah,
is.
and it's just once again the two thought systems. I was listening on a Ken's audios this morning, and one of the questions that comes up, it's sort of a variation of how did the impossible occur, but it's essentially trying to basically make a statement but pose it as a question, and one of the questions that surfaces frequently, as Ken remarked, is, well, if I don't finish quote unquote the course's curriculum in this lifetime, will I have to start over again from ground zero? And and Ken says, well, that assumes that a we are in bodies, and that our learning is contingent on a linear time sequence, neither of which the course acknowledges. It basically says, there is no world, which means there is no bodies in truth, and which means there's no space and there's no time. So anything involving duality, space, time, individuality is a misunderstanding. So, um, we have to. I keep reminding myself is that within the dream, was events that we call birth and death that seem to be opposites, but from the course's perspective, they're non-events because what comes and goes in a dream can't have any impact in reality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And as I just was thinking about, have you ever seen that movie, My Cousin Vinny?
a while ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a courtroom scene where they have what's her name, the girlfriend who's like supposed to be this dumb, New Jersey girl or whatever, and they ask her, something about cars, and they ask her this specific question because she's supposed to be an expert. She says she's an expert, and she says, "No, I can't answer that question." And the guy's like, "Well, yeah, there you go. You can't answer the question." And she goes, "No, because it's not really a real question, you know."
Hmm.
And that's it. What we're asking is not a real question.
Right.
Uh, I love that, and it really is a statement that says yeah, we're separate. Yeah, yeah. Then that has to be fixed. No, that's the statement. We're separate, and that has to be fixed. So I love that. Thank you, Bruce.
Sure.
Um, And if you haven't seen that movie, it is very cute. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
I remember it being. It's probably been. Well, it seemed like I saw it right after it came out. So
Yeah.
yeah, thereabouts.
That just make it just, all these things when I see them, it just reminds me of just how beautiful we are. If so what we made a world that's full of, weird crap, but it's still we're just so beautiful. I just saw a thing a couple days ago, and maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, of a little boy who a kid who got hurt skateboarding, and he's like in the emergency room at the hospital,
Uh-huh.
and they're trying to whatever happened, I don't know, broke his foot or something. I have no idea what really happened to him, but he was seeing Jesus and his dead father and his grandfather, and he's telling everybody, you're so beautiful, look how pretty you look, you're just so beautiful. And he would just, he saw God, he's just going on how beautiful everything was. And I was listening to that, I was very moved by it, it was very moving. I'll send you a link to it if you haven't seen it.
Okay, sure. I mean,
It's
yeah.
just amazing because in the background everybody's going, oh, well, it's okay, honey, yeah, he's not really here, you're doing okay. They're all telling him he's not having this experience that he's having, and he does not hear them at all. And he's still just having this experience of seeing, everything beautiful and God and Jesus and his dad and grandpa who passed away. So, just and telling him how much he loved him. And it really is very cool. But the reason I'm, even thinking about this is because that's how we do, that's how the ego does.
Uh-huh.
You can say, I see Jesus, and your friends are going to go, you'll be okay, honey. You know,
Well, the irony, of course, is in the same audio that I was listening to this morning from Ken. Is like, he's pointing out, well, everyone and everything here is a metaphor. It's a symbol. It's a representation of an idea, and
right,
the separate selves that we've identified with, which is, essentially, it's not the problem. The separate self isn't the problem. It's the wanting to identify as separate that's the problem. It's the believing that we could pull off this impossible crime that, upon, you know, sober yet gentle reflection, is like an impossible crime. That's like, well, why would I want to identify with something that basically makes sin, guilt, fear, death, war, polarization, and duality real when there's a real alternative that I've never left, except I'm just a incredibly vivid dreamer, and I call this dream that I'm having space-time and
yeah,
individuality and the whole whole pan-galactic dream of a universe of stuff, separate bodies, from quarks to quasars, and all the magnitudes in between.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
From God to Galactus. Uh,
Yeah, well, from, and we try to drag God into our dream. We try to take perfect oneness and drag it into our dream of duality, of separation, of symbols, and it doesn't fit.
no, no, yeah,
It's
it don't
trying to
work.
cram the ocean into a thimble, and it's just, we're going to leave stuff out, and obviously miss the whole gestalt of the ocean. Yeah,
That's right,
using that
absolutely.
metaphor. Yeah.
Yep, all of it. All right, so shall we read? We'll read.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I
Go
got us
ahead.
on bottom of, or toward the bottom of page 439 in the print version that I have, and you've got us at about 85% in the digital version you're looking at. Should I start in where we left off?
Yeah, and just for everyone to know, so we're this is about, this part here is about Helen's, what is it, ambivalence toward Jesus, or
Hmm. Hmm.
Helen's, what it's actually got a title that I think is really uh
Well, chapter 16 is, which is we're into a fair amount,
defenses
is
against Jesus and against love, special, whoops, I screwed this up. Special hatred and special love.
Yeah,
So
right.
we're talking about, Helen's upset
Helen's ambivalence toward Jesus. Yeah,
and ambivalence towards Jesus.
right.
And so,
Which is a reflection again of our everyone's ambivalence toward Jesus or any ego-free symbol, whether we call it Holy Spirit or Rumpelstiltskin. The words don't matter, but the idea of a part of our mind, which ultimately really is all of our mind, because the rest was made up, but a part of our mind as we think of it that represents the way back to the perfect peace, the perfect innocence that we never left. And we're working our way back to it at a rate that we can, a pace we can, because of our belief in time and what we think of as progress, we're doing it in a rate that we're comfortable with. But at some point, we will drop the whole facade in our mind and just realize, well, I was just silly.
yeah, really.
I was just having a very silly dream, and everything that that had, that the tiny mad idea when terror took the place of love, that will just seem like how absurd for me to have considered that. And it'd be like the Gilligan's Island 3 hour tour is over.
Yeah, yeah.
What was supposed to be
Uh,
just a little momentary blip on the radar, we've turned into, you know, how many billions of years? Yeah.
isn't that just as hilarious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I pick up where we left off then?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Another time during the early months of taking down the course, Helen pulled out all the stops in her attempts to attack and denigrate Jesus. She let down her guard and directly accused him of all the psychological problems she could think of, saying to him, in effect, "What authority do you have? You are a paranoid schizophrenic filled with delusions of grandeur, thoughts of religious persecution, and are of uncertain psychosexual development." Wasn't expecting that one. Um, and then Ken goes on in quotes, "Oh, I don't know about that," quote unquote. Jesus gently replied to her, "After all power in heaven and earth were given unto me." And I guess that's Helen's notes, something she wrote down. Anyway, then Ken comments, says Helen could not argue with his response and retreated from her position in stunned yet humble silence. I'm going to pause for a moment, just because we're on the topic of Jesus. Um, over the last few days, finished watching season 5 of the brilliantly done series called The Chosen. I don't know if any of you have seen any of it, but if you're a course student, I would recommend it, sort of with a caveat and or a caution. It's there's parts of it that I think are inspired and really go leap years beyond the biblical story in terms of portraying Jesus as a smiling, um, figure that could laugh and joke around and didn't take himself seriously in one sense, and the genuine devotion and consternation of his disciples was also brilliantly reflected. Great casting, uh, great production values, and just super well done. Where I think it stops short is it really tries to adhere to the Bible's theological, story. And so there's, it's the same old dualistic stuff. And and in places where it's really brilliant and inspired, and then there in the next moment there's after it rhapsodizes and demonstrates an understanding of at least a attempt at non what I could perceive as non-dual teaching, which would be inclusion, and as an example. Then it turns around and then promotes exclusion. So it's a mixed bag, but I think there's enough in parts of it that are inspired, and the dialogue and if even if you haven't grown up with a Christian background, I think you could appreciate just the storytelling aspect of it. And then, put your course hat on as you're watching it, as I like to do with anything else as well. And just notice, what you resonate with and what you don't. And I just find it interesting to see what can be done with a story that really has impacted, billions of lives, and yet still continues to have both truth and misrepresentation uh, promoted significantly. Anyway, that's enough of that. Anyway,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
And, and
yeah,
and and a lot of that stuff, I have seen, of course, a lot of it, is like stuff that Paul was teaching about,
right, right,
which didn't really have anything to do with Jesus because he didn't even know him. I wasn't even around at the
right.
time.
Yeah.
And I just look at that and I just say, that don't sound like Jesus. Somebody else.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's parts of it where some of the biblical quotes that I think are inspired and haven't been messed with, are portrayed beautifully with real great depth and compassion and caring and inclusion and that sort of thing. And then they turn around and in the next scene or the next episode, and it's like, oh well, so much for that idea. Back to the you know the we they polarizing story and so anyway it's a definitely a mixed bag, but yeah, brilliantly done in terms of like I say, the casting and the costumes and the sets and the acting is really well done I having grown up with those stories, as probably billions of other people on this planet have, one form or another. It's interesting to see, the thought and care that's put into it. At the same time, just using it a little discernment to say, well, here's what resonates with something that's going to work, which I think the course represents, and then here's what doesn't. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a great exercise. So
yeah. And as for as you're mentioning, Paul not being a contemporary of Jesus, there's a really good documentary that I would recommend for anyone that has been exposed to Christianity or been involved in it. It's called Marketing the Messiah, and a bunch of biblical scholars discuss, I think, with a fair amount of objectivity and about what might be believable from a historical standpoint about the biblical stories, and what is just pure speculation, and what's who knows.
yeah,
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 yeah. It's
yeah.
called
Which
Marketing
I
the
mean,
Messiah. Really good documentary.
interesting. I'd be interested to see that
Yeah.
because a lot is made of the quote unquote miracles that Jesus performed, and um, you know obviously he probably did he was able to manipulate the dream if he was aware that he was the dreamer, and he was aware that he could do that, which apparently might have been was probably the case, but he didn't make anything happen that wasn't already in the script. So the idea that it was a miraculous thing is attributing nothing to nothing.
No, right, right. Yeah, and I think we're so convinced that this world is all there is, or at least you know major portion of reality, that we do probably more level of confusion than we realize on a moment to moment basis.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was thinking is, two books ago in the series that you and I have been reading together, Lynn, we read the Gary Renard's fourth book, um, Lifetimes When Jesus and Buddha Knew Each Other, which also included Mary Magdalene. The three of them were equals in their spiritual, not only progress but assistance to each other. And I found that really helpful to read a second time, and probably at some point, not too long from now, I'll probably read it again, because I think it really clarifies a lot of the misunderstandings and a lot of the
Right.
stories of
Understand the
our.
thoughts about what the sequencing of time and the dream and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that kind of business.
yeah. And like Ken's biography of Helen that we've been reading, I think Gary's fourth book really, um, I don't think it brought Jesus, Buddha, and Mary Magdalene down to our level. I think what it really did is it showed that they were progressing up through where we think we are, to the reality that we all have never left, and gave us something, a reference point that we say, well, I can relate to that. I've had times in my life when I've, and not infrequent, where I've been in jealous, angry, upset, fearful, depressed, and all those things that basically plague ego dedicated minds. And if I can just kind of notice, well, okay, they must have gone through the same thing. And Gary's fourth book, I think, really shows that in a very compassionate way. And it shows how they really did use the principle of shared interest working together and across half a dozen lifetimes to really help each other wake up from the dream of duality. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, and here we are, on Saturday mornings,
And
doing the
it
same
is
thing.
like lifetimes.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, if you want to keep reading.
Sure. Okay. Um, so Ken continues. I remember still another occasion when Helen was in an absolute fury regarding Jesus and something he was asking of her, which she stubbornly resisted. At some point in the midst of her tirade, she was able to hear his clear, though gentle response. This is one battle you will never win. Kind of like another sense I remember Ken says that infuriated Helen was, and God thinks otherwise.
God thinks otherwise.
Yeah,
That's right.
it says, in addition, during our editing of chapter 23 in the text, Helen recalled to me her anger. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Well, here it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I must have been either visually reading ahead unconsciously or whatever. Okay.
No, you just remembered it and
Yeah. Okay. Helen recalled to me her anger when, and after Jesus described the insane thought system of the ego, he stated, and God thinks otherwise. Helen's anger reflected her attitude. Quote, who does he think he is? Unquote. An exclamation point there. This was an ego defense that was usually very difficult for Helen to set aside. So, would you like to pick up from there?
sure.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay,
And
good.
before you do, I'll just comment. It's like, well, yeah, I mean that we all dig in our heels when we basically tell Jesus, Holy Spirit, tell any ego-free presence in our mind that crops up. It's like, hell no, I won't go. When we rather would be upset and revel in and wallow in our self-pity, our self-righteous martyrdom and victimhood, our indignance about whether it's the latest political um, atrocity or environmental disaster or financial reversal or pick anything that seems to push our buttons, our health issues, um, anything that crosses our minds on the news that we think is outside in the world, but it's really happening on the screen of my mind. That's an infuriating idea to every ego. Wait a minute. I mean, I got to be responsible for what I think about this? Oh, whoops.
It's hilarious. And yeah, you know it. I mean, that's the thing. We know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we all do. I think that's why we're drawn to the course because on some deep level we know that it's not like we have to, atone for sin in the the sense that there was a crime committed. It's basically the course says you have to look at we have to look at what we think is the sin, guilt, fear, thought system of the ego. See with Holy Spirit's help that it was made up not only in our projections, and that's usually the first step is looking at what we've projected on the world and seeing how horrific things seem to be out there, quote unquote, in the world, and realize, well, it's my interpretation that's so upsetting because the events in a dream have to be neutral. And if that's true, then my thoughts about myself with regard to having been, an accomplice or, and, basically, what's the word? Well, anyway, yeah, we're we were involved in the dream process. So it's basically,
Guilty.
yeah, it's my mind that's harboring the guilt. So I need to be willing to look at my own uh, self-condemnation as well as my projected condemnation, which are really ultimately the same. And that's why those early workbook lessons alternate back and forth between inner and outer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just I mean, it's just so perfectly set up
Hmm.
so that we can all things are lessons God would have me learn. Everything is just so perfectly set up to show me this so that I can decide to let go of it. Otherwise, I'm going to pretend I'm going to think that it's real, pretend I said, and I'm going to react and act in accordance with what I believe it to be. And it is not that way. Um, so let's see. Let's see. Okay. Shortly after we began editing the course together, Helen and I came to the line currently in the third paragraph of Revelation Time and Miracles in chapter 1. This is how it read in the Hugh Lynn version. An elder brother, Helen incidentally capitalized these two words in her notebooks. An elder brother is entitled to respect for his greater experience and a reasonable amount of obedience for his greater wisdom. And Ken had put that reasonable in italics, reasonable amount. Um, I said to Helen that the qualifying a reasonable amount of did not seem quite right. After all, one would either be obedient to Jesus or not. Helen's face turned red as she laughingly confessed that she had originally heard only the word obedience. However, she could not bring herself to write that word in her notebook without first lessening the commitment to Jesus that it represented. She, of course, knew it did not belong, and so she gladly consented to removing the phrase. One could not ask for a clearer example of Helen's resistance to holding back nothing from her Lord. And I just wanted to say, I can almost guarantee you that that reasonable amount is in every other version of A Course in Miracles that have been printed from the non-authorized Hewlin Casey or the non-authorized notes. So uh, that's that it was not true, and Helen put that in there out of her own mind. And yet I'm sure that I can go and look, but I'm sure that it's actually how it's published in those other editions.
I like the way
uh
you said that, out of her mind.
yeah. Yes.
Well, and I omitted own.
Yeah, yeah, yes, oh yeah.
But
I was like, did I say that?
out of her, I think you said out of her own mind.
Yeah,
But that's it. That's just it. Is if it's coming from me, it's going to be flawed because the the mind that I made up that seems to be separate is an absurd, hilarious parody of God's creation. Of course, keeps reminding us that we haven't really committed any crime. I love that phrase in the course that says, brother, you have not sinned, but you've been much mistaken. And that's not to be any way condemning. It's just saying we have no idea how absurd the world that we made up is until we look at it clearly and dispassionately with the Holy Spirit's vision, with Jesus's vision, and see it for what it is, as just a ridiculous lampoon of truth. But truth can't be offended. If truth were offended by anything that we did in a dream, then it wouldn't be true.
that's right.
Yeah.
It couldn't be.
Hmm. You know,
All right.
God is not mocked, as it says
God is not mocked.
in the
That's
course.
right. So she did remove the phrase from the official FIP version. One could not ask for a clearer example of Helen's resistance to holding back nothing from her Lord. Jesus addresses this issue a bit later in these words, currently found in the 8th paragraph of Love Without Conflict in chapter 4. Watch carefully and see what it is you are really asking for. Be very honest with yourself in this, for we must hide nothing from each other. And how many times does Jesus ask us in the course, be very honest with yourself? I mean, he's not pulling any punches. So yeah, see what it is that you're really asking for. Be very honest with yourself. We can't hide from each other what it is that we really want. So Ken continues, a moving experience for Helen and for me powerfully illustrated her inner conflict with Jesus. This experience directly reflected her shame over her love for him and shifted the quote unquote battleground to a level deeper than her anger. It occurred one afternoon while we were sitting in her living room couch, on her living room couch, musing over Helen's rather unusual life. Helen that day was in a particularly angry mood, bitter over what she felt, with considerable justification from her point of view, to be the inequity of having kept her promise of doing Jesus's work for him while he had not kept his promises of help to her. Helen was specifically referring to Jesus's assurance that she would find peace, as she frequently heard him tell her. Helen went on and on for a while that afternoon in a hostile tirade against Jesus' betrayal of his promises to help her, using language that would seem most unbefitting a scribe of A Course in Miracles. Finally, I suggested to Helen that she might do better with this situation if she brought up her anger directly to Jesus rather than using me as a middleman. She finally agreed and so quieted her mind sufficiently to ask Jesus very specifically, "Why have you not helped me more? Oh God, why haven't you helped me more? Why aren't you doing anything for me?" Oh my God, I heard that ringing in my ears. His answer, hardly what she was expecting, was also very specific. "I cannot help you more because you are so ashamed of me." Recognizing the truth of Jesus' words, Helen broke down in tears. She understood that she had never really asked him for help to undo her basic conflict, always striving to limit his assistance to non personal or extraneous matters. Shame, of course, is an aspect of guilt, a guilt which resulted in part from these persistent attempts to exclude Jesus from her life so that she could be in charge. As mentioned before, Helen had to be in control, preferring to be right with her ego rather than happy with God. And I just might point out that in today's lesson, Jesus is telling us specifically not to do this,
Hmm.
not to make plans. Either we turn it over to Holy Spirit and let it go, or we hold on to it and make plans. But we can't turn it over and still make plans. We have to let go of the notion that we have anything to say about what is going to happen or what has happened or what is happening, because we don't know what anything is. We don't know what it's for. We don't know. And so all these plans that the ego is so eager to make, just in case, contingency plans, just in case Jesus doesn't make me feel better, I'm going to take a Quaalude. I don't know if those are still around. Those are something that people used to take, like I don't know, for their nerves or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but we can't give it over and hold on to it at the same time. And that's what Jesus was telling her. If you are not willing to commit to me, to know me, to allow me to be in charge, then you're going to suffer. No, flat out. There's no doubt about it. If I'm not allowing the Holy Spirit or Jesus to be in charge, I'm going to suffer.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
can't give it and hold on to it at the same time.
Right.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah. And I think it's so easy to get into a level of confusion thing in terms of thinking that um, I need Jesus or Holy Spirit or some kind of higher guidance to direct what I do in the world. That really is in stark contrast to the course's metaphysics that suggests that the world is a product of a divided mind, and it's our imagination and our interpretation that wants to make a big deal about the world so that we don't ask for help. Um, and because we're like Helen's example with Jesus, we're ashamed of that part of our mind. What we're really ashamed of is uh, a, a poor choice for a thought system of duality. But that's the last thing that we want to, be honest with and bring out in the open. And when Ken was talking about, and of course, it says, we must be really honest with each other. Jesus is telling us, and Helen, us by extension. Um, he's not really. he's saying that Jesus is being dishonest. He's and kind of one of his talks, and maybe probably more than one. He just says, the onus is on us because it's not like Jesus is withholding anything from us. We're the one that's doing the withholding, and the withholding is the part of our identity that we would exclude. We're basically saying, I'm ashamed of, or and guilty, embarrassed. I find it humiliating to admit that I made up a world where I seem to be lacking and exposed in my inadequacy and stupidity and absurdity. And that really is when we look at it and start with that initial place in our mind and just say, wow, that's what I think about myself. I think I'm the home of evil, darkness, and sin, like lesson 93 says. But the title of the lesson is Light and Peace and Joy Abide in Me. But that's because the truth, when we bring the misconceptions to the truth, all the inadequacies, the uncertainty, loneliness, and the fear disappear. But we have to be willing to bring that to uh, the sane part of our mind, and it's usually a gradual process. Right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it has to start with a willingness. And, even though Helen was willing to take notes, uh, at what point did she become willing to turn her um, life and her affairs over to Jesus or the Holy Spirit? It's like she was just, no, no, no. I can do it. I can do it myself. Like, have you ever seen a little? I just saw a video earlier too, of a little girl and a little toddler, and she was trying to put her shoes on, and the mom was saying it's on the wrong foot, and the little girl's like, "No, it's not." She's like, "Yes, it's on the wrong foot." No, it's not. And she put both shoes on the wrong feet and went all day with both shoes. They were like Crocs on the wrong feet. That's what this is what this reminds me of. I'd rather I'd rather wear my shoes on the wrong feet than admit that I was maybe not correct in
Mhm.
which which foot went in which shoe. Oh my gosh. So yeah, so later on when I figured out how silly that was, I laughed. But at the time, I was determined to have those shoes on those feet. Okay, so shame, of course, is an aspect of guilt, a guilt which resulted in part from these persistent attempts to exclude Jesus from her life so that she could be in charge. As mentioned before, Helen had to be in control, preferring to be right with her ego rather than happy with God. Indeed, her relationship with Jesus was a guilty secret for Helen, as indeed was A Course in Miracles, a secret that was shared with practically no one to this day, and of course, now I think there's a lot of people that know, but to this day, less than a handful of people at the medical center know anything about Bill's typing the previous day's course notes from Helen's dictation to him, an event that went on almost daily behind locked office doors. Thus, practically no one of Helen's friends, colleagues, or family knew anything about the course or her other life.
Mhm. I'm
Uh,
looking at the copyright page in my print version of the
huh,
book. Um, it says copyright 1991. So yeah, probably in that era, there probably was a pretty small number of people that at Columbia, Princeton that knew, or Columbia
yeah,
Presbyterian, that in New York that knew about Helen's, inner life and what was going on outside of her academic life.
right, or
Yeah.
Bill, right,
And
and
Or
all know
Bill, yeah.
now.
Yeah, well, yeah, well, if in, and there's probably plenty of people that still don't who, they're this is still below their radar.
Yeah, don't know, don't care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right,
As it's true probably with, a lot of people that we know in our everyday lives that have no understanding, at least, on a specific level that we're involved in A Course in Miracles
that's right.
or even what
Absolutely.
that might be.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But
Oh,
minds are joined, so every person we interact with becomes a classroom seen properly, right? Whether it's in person or just our thoughts about someone.
exactly. Exactly. and that's it. I mean, that's why all things are lessons God would have me learn.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Back again, thinking of the lesson,
Hmm.
because everything is the classroom.
Right.
Let's see. All right. So humorous, though at the time highly embarrassing incident for Helen occurred while we were in Israel. A couple whom Helen and Louis had been friendly with for many years had moved to Jerusalem several years earlier, and they kept in touch through occasional letters. The last thing in the world Helen wanted was to meet them, however, and so she never notified them of our visit. How could she possibly explain what we were all doing there? We had even joked about this possibility since Helen had expressed her guilt over not informing them of our trip. And then, sure enough, one evening as we were walking into a restaurant near the King David Hotel, we bumped right into them. I have never seen Helen more flustered. She, who was almost always so perfectly composed in public. She did not know what to say as her friends gently reprimanded her for not telling them of the trip. Helen sputtered out something about this being kind of a top secret enterprise, implying a connection to the government intelligence agencies. Oh
Oh,
my
that's funny.
God.
Now that might have flown for Bill, but probably not Helen. That's funny. I forgot about
Top
this. I mean, it's
secret.
been so long since we've read this. A lot of this just seems like we reading it first time because I
I
forgot
don't
about this little
remember
part.
this at all.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh my gosh, but does that, I mean, that's like a plot from a movie.
Oh, sure, yeah. Comedic
Um,
oops. Yeah.
okay. Thus, she was not free to reveal the nature of the trip, but would be able to talk more at a later time. The couple had an appointment, and so, fortunately for Helen, could not stay any longer. One of the funniest moments of my life then followed. We all sat down for dinner, and then Bill and I began to kid Helen about not telling her friends the truth. And so we told the true story about why we were in Israel, beginning with Helen's 1965 visions and experiences, describing of the course, and continuing on through the cave episode. The contrast between all that we said, which was absolutely true, and the way we knew it would sound to a normal person, which included Helen's circle of personal and professional acquaintances, was uproariously funny. And I can just imagine them sitting around and saying, and then
Uh-huh.
I was the high priestess and everyone was worshiping me. And then,
And that's the Ken brings up a good point is, if we really can look at our own lives from something that's outrageously perspective of something that's outrageously funny seen properly, then we can not take it quite so seriously. I'm telling this to myself because I'm applying this to my current situation. Last night, my wife and I um, signed an offer to on a house that will have us moving back to Oregon in the next month or so. So,
wow.
so, and the comedy of that is this will be our third move to Oregon uh, from other states. So maybe the third time's the charm. I we'll see. Maybe if we can get it right. But it's when you're immersed in everyday stuff, including buying and selling real estate and watching your finances shift dramatically and just all that stuff and then all the stuff of one's personal household belongings and the logistics of moving and yada yada. It's interesting to just kind of watch like, well, there's a part of my mind that I think is a little more predominant, a little stronger, and I give more attention to than I have in the 31 previous moves I've made in this lifetime. Counting from infancy, just for full disclosure, um, it's like, well, rearranging the deck chairs on a holographic, on a holodeck tree, um, a Titanic holodeck dream is not going to change reality, but it might change the appearance of the deck on the holodeck. Anyway,
To you,
to me, yeah, exactly, yeah.
from your
Uh,
point of view.
And I also try to remember, and I think I'm remembering more frequently since I've been studying the course for over 4 decades. So it's just more than half of this particular lifetime that I've been finding solace and sanity from the course. That well, there's a line in lesson 182. It says, 1,000 homes he makes, and none contents his restless mind. Well, I've got 900 and 60 some to go, but if I take that literally, but obviously Ken says it's about the relationship we have with everyone and everything. That
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we keep thinking, well, I'll just have this particular set of circumstances with these people, with this geography, with this diet, with this new job, this new whatever, we're always setting ourselves up for disappointment of one sort or another, unless we just see it as a classroom. But we're basically, you know, building the prison walls and bars by our expectations, thinking
that's
thinking with level confusion that what happens or doesn't happen in the dream of space-time is going to make me happy or make me sad.
yeah, and that's exactly that's what lesson 193
Yep.
says in
Yeah.
today's lesson
Yep.
is basically saying that very same thing.
Hmm.
And one of the things uh, that I was noticing this morning with my group as I was reading it, I was thinking about um, I will forgive and this will disappear. And I just was listening to Michael Singer uh, podcast the other day, and he was saying, why do you carry things from one minute to the next? Why do you carry this thing from this hour to that to the next hour when you've already solved it in this hour, and yet you carry it with you and you continue, and we're carrying all these things from our lifetime that have
Yep.
long been over and long been concluded, long been resolved, and yet we carry them with us as if they are currently happening right now. And
Hmm.
we think about this, think about all the quote memories that I have about my life. They're all ideas of me carrying this story with me that that isn't happening right now. Um, and so, that's why, I can forgive and it will disappear. And there's one of the places in this lesson where he actually does here. I'm going to go put it up real quick. Hey, Dove, good morning. I'm going to put it up real quick here because this idea, first off, one day I decided to look up everywhere in the course where Jesus says 1,000. And pretty interesting. He says 1,000 a lot. Uh,
Oh yeah. In fact, I put that in the glossary that, uh, and with links to hundred, dozens, hundreds,
uh-huh.
thousands. I'll find that glossary entry and put a link to
Yeah.
in the
So
chat.
yeah, so he says, we'll attempt today to overcome 1,000 seeming obstacles and to peace
Mhm.
in just one day, 1,000.
Well, if you think about how often our minds go from one little flip this way and that way from one thought to another, it's pretty amazing, really, that we have, just an enormous amount of activity in our mind throughout the day. And our brains reflect that, but it's really our minds that are so incredibly powerful that we don't even have a well, a
Yeah,
barely a notion of how much we do with our mind. And then the course says, the course aims is at a complete reversal of thought. So that's
yeah,
a lot of thoughts in what we think of as a day, right?
right. And a plethora. So
Yeah. Yeah.
a plethora of them. And so yeah, they're happening all the time. But what I was noticing as I was going through this with my group was that um these things that we carry with us for the lifetime, those are all the accusations that we've given to ourselves and to our brothers about what we think that they've done. And
Hmm.
what I was noticing is, and I'm sure maybe some other people have had this experience, if you've ever been to a funeral of a loved one, a friend, whatever, and you go to the after party, where they serve up
Hmm. Right.
snacks in the reception hall or the church or whatever. Um, And people are sitting around and talking, and they're not sitting around saying, that rat bastard, what a jerk he was, I'm glad he's dead. They're not doing that. They're saying, remember that time that we got lost and he did this, and all the grievances that we held against him now are forgiven because he's gone. And now we can look back on him and we can laugh a little while about it. And that's really what we should be doing every moment, every second. Every one of those thousand things come up, forgive it and let it go, because it is, you can't, you cannot take it with you into your lifetime without carrying a grievance. So let it go and it will disappear. All of those
Hmm.
upsets are gone when I choose that. So
And
I
they're
think
gone from our mind, not from the world necessarily. I think that's a common level of confusion practice of thinking, well, I will forgive and, this situation in the world will disappear. No, my ego interpretations, are what are we're questioning and letting go of when the problem disappears, because the problem is never in the world, it's always in the mind. And in particular, it's in the decision-making faculty of our mind that's choosing uh, to believe in duality, to believe in the ego.
that's it exactly.
Yeah,
And so that's why when I forgive it, it's no longer a problem in my mind. And if it is a problem in my mind, then I haven't forgiven it.
right.
And I can forgive it 1,000 times until it's no longer, there is no perception of problem in the mind. And that's really all we need to do. So, and thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Bruce has put in the chat the glossary for the uh, where the thousands are. This is a brilliant work, and uh, it's, I'm going to open it up.
It's
So
it's collaborative too. So I also put in many, multitude, hundred, thousands, and millions. There's only a couple institute of multitude and millions, but 199 of many,
wow,
yeah,
wow,
and 36 of thousands. So I mean, it's again, Ken says we should read it as an epic poem, and the poetry of the course is really designed to remind us that, again, we are symbols and metaphors, and a poem uses symbols and metaphors to try to get us to a place in our mind where we can see something that we wouldn't have seen without that understanding, right? And
exactly.
yeah.
I love that. And I'm just going to read this paragraph that's here. Leave then the transfer of your learning to the one who really understands its laws and who will guarantee that they remain unviolated and unlimited. Your part is merely to apply what he has taught you to yourself, and he will do the rest. And it is thus the power of your learning will be proved to you by all the many different witnesses it finds. And so you'll see it differently completely. Your
Hmm.
brother first among them will be seen, but thousands stand behind him, and beyond each one of them there are 1,000 more. Each one may seem to have a problem that is different from the rest, yet they are solved together, and their common answer shows the question could not have been separate.
Hmm.
I will forgive, and this will disappear.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. I love it. All
So,
right.
so the course is written in dualistic language because that's what we can relate to, but it leads to us back to the threshold of a place in our mind where the pure non-duality, which was the source and the inspiration of the course, resides, eternally in our mind. And so it's really leading. It's there to use becoming more frequent. Phrase that I like that Ken I know uses a lot is, and I think it's lesson 302, he the end we seek, he the means by which we go to him. That we're using the 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 practice of looking at our mind without condemnation, without divisiveness, without duality, to get back to a place in our mind where the separation never happened. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there are not thousands of anything.
Right, right. Yeah. The multitudes are just a learning device seen properly for
Exactly.
learning to generalize and see that all the problems are the same. It's just that one tiny mad idea that we can choose against.
That's
Truth is
yeah,
true and nothing else is true. And if I can accept both parts of that statement, that nothing else is true, then I'm done.
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's it. Thank you so much, Bruce. I do appreciate it. And anybody who would follow that link will get to the glossary that we speak of.
Yeah,
And
and that's been a collaborative effort. It was something that our mutual friend Dave Van Dyke and I worked on for a year or two, and then I've had multiple contributions from a number of different fellow course students, and so it's definitely a collaborative effort. And so anyway, and I welcome suggestions for other entries and additions to existing ones. So um, that's where there's a couple of forms on the sidebar for that if anybody finds it helpful and thinks of other things that might help it further. Well, certainly welcomed and appreciated.
all right. Yep. Salvation is a collaborative venture.
Hmm.
So, thank you so much, Bruce.
Thanks, Lynn.
All right.